Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Brew Talks. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. There's still some folks waiting to get in, so I know we're running a little bit behind. For the folks in the back, there's plenty of seats up here if you want to come sit up near the stage. And we'll be kicking off in about 2 minutes, so enjoy a beer, find a seat. And we'll do this thing live in a couple of minutes. Thanks. this evening or this afternoon. My name is Chris Fernari. I'm the editor of Brewbound, and this is Brew Talk CBC 2018. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. First and foremost, big shout out to Dogfish Head for helping set this whole thing up. Without you guys, we wouldn't be doing this, and we're doing this for 2 years. 3 events each year in 18 and 19, and then maybe we'll talk about 2020. Might have to renegotiate. Might have to have a bigger venue because we have so many people here today. Thank you guys for coming. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Already thanked Dogfish, but also wanted to thank Orchestrated Beer and some of our other sponsors. We have Ampco Pumps, Thielman, Vicinity Brew, PFE, EPR Properties, Happy Cog, and Athletic Event Supply. Thank you guys for helping make this event possible. Without you, we wouldn't have our entire Brewbound staff here checking people in and making this event run smoothly. We wouldn't have my good friend Josh Pratt back there fixing our live stream and making it work. Our videographer Dave floating around grabbing footage. So a big round of applause to our sponsors and the entire Brewbound team. And with that, let's jump right in. With more than 6,300 breweries now competing in the marketplace, identifying a core set of consumers and turning them into loyal brand advocates at a time when the beer category has never been more crowded is, at this point, nearly impossible. Today's craft beer environment is challenging. Consumers have been conditioned to constantly seek new and different offerings, which has led to the rotation nation phenomenon that you guys are all no doubt aware of. And that brought with it an entire generation of drinkers who rarely order the same beer twice. So, how do you cut through the clutter and emerge as a brand and stand apart from the rest? That's what our first group of panelists are here to discuss today. We've got 3 of the brightest marketing and brand building minds in craft here to share with you some of their strategies and insights. Each of their companies are taking unique approaches to building brands through integrated sports marketing partnerships, holiday-based promotions, and the ever-growing trend of direct-to-consumer sales opportunities. Today's Brew Talk speakers will have a different way, all have a different way of elevating their brands and driving consumer interest. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Dogfish Head Vice President of Marketing Neil Stewart, Trillium Brewing co-founder JC Tatro, and Boulevard Brewing Vice President of Marketing Natalie Gershon. And I don't know if you guys need beers, but maybe we can get some beers for them.
Yes.
Yes.
Little sequence.
Neil, you feel so far away over there. You have like your own table. Yeah. We pulled Neil.
I got to do my Instagram story real quick. Hang on.
Oh, yeah. The marketing guy. I forgot. Yeah.
I want to thank you for the 45 minutes notice on our questions. It was very kind of you.
Well, we don't want scripted responses, Neil.
We're very prepared.
So we managed to pull Neil off the beach for 45 minutes to talk with us. We can go back and forth all day if you want.
Let's do it.
No, let's actually dive into the meat of what we want to get to today. As I mentioned, 6,300 breweries. How much tougher is it to stand out nowadays, and how much has the evolution of the marketplace changed the way that you all market to a completely new set of consumers? And I'll start with Neil since you're the co-host here.
Let me get my notes out here.
No scripted responses, Neil.
So yeah, I mean it's really difficult these days. You know, there are so many breweries out there. What we found is that if you want to kind of market yourself through sponsorships, a lot of sponsorships are locked up. So you have to do a pretty good job of conducting some due diligence to find the ones that are right for your brand. I think for us, standing out is it's a constant battle. You have to be active year round. It's not like the old days where you could kind of scale up your marketing efforts during the summer months or whenever you're selling a higher percentage of your beer. So it's a 12-month battle year in and year out.
Natalie, how are you guys doing it at Boulevard? You guys have an awesome partnership with the Royals, I know, and you got your fingers in a lot of different opportunities. So maybe tell our crowd about it.
Yeah, I would say very similarly. Carving out white space is difficult at best. Finding organically, authentically fitting white space is even harder. But the push, the everyday, the 365. There isn't non-beer selling, non-beer drinking season. So I think it's about pushing on the right levers and the right beers at the right time, especially for us, focusing on what's seasonal and what's appropriate and giving consumers something to grasp onto and really engage with at the right time of the year. So that's worked best for us, I would say. Yeah.
JC, you don't have to do any marketing because you have like one of the best breweries in the world at this point, right? So it must be really easy to sell beer at Trillium.
Well, that's setting me up for being very sweaty palmed right now. I mean, we're just a mom and pop shop. I know it's a little obnoxious to kind of hear me say that, but we do our best to kind of just react. We just do our best to react to what people say that they want from us. And we have a pretty short cycle between who the customer is standing in front of us and the brewer, me. I'm there every day. I listen to what people say, and we kind of react to that and make sure that it's the most optimal intersection between what feels right to me and what people tell us that they want from us.
And how much of your business now is direct to consumer?
It varies week to week, month to month, but it's 95+%.
And I got to imagine that you're one of the few breweries probably in the industry that's able to get away with that. Is that something that you attribute to the brand that you've built, the marketplace that you're in? What is it?
The short answer is kind of all of the above. It's where craft beer is today, but also where it was when we started 5 years ago. I remember sitting at my desk at my old job where I used to manage clinical research, and my phone was pinging, and people were posting on Beer Advocate what the line was like at The Alchemist for Heady Topper that day, and it was Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was unbelievable. I was kind of doing the quick math, and I was running over to my buddy who also liked craft beer, and I couldn't imagine that there was enough people in the world to buy enough beer from that one place in this remote place in Vermont. And it's not necessarily that we designed our business like that, but we kind of, it was a thing that we saw, for sure.
Yeah. And you're sort of riding the wave now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Natalie, you guys don't have the pleasure of being able to sell 95% of all your beer directly to consumers.
Nope.
But you do have to deal with a lot of different breweries and compete in a lot of different markets. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you guys choose your sort of home and away strategies as it relates to marketing and brand building? What differs close to home versus markets that might be, several hundred miles away?
Absolutely. Boulevard started 29 years ago, so it was the brewery in Kansas City, and we had the honor of being one of the first breweries in the Midwest. So it was the home beer for so many markets and so many people, and that's drastically changed now. And we love that because we love that beer is such a rich industry, and there's so much competitiveness, and there's so much elevation of the category. But it has definitely kind of applied some pressure to us, which is awesome. It allows us to rise to the challenge. It also allows our brewers to some drive to make awesome, better beers. So home and away, they don't differ drastically, with the exception of that home, I would say, is our strategy amplified about 1,000%. So away, we really lead with our higher end, our smokestack offerings, keep it pretty focused on those. Fewer offerings, more specific strategy, if you will, tighter programming, a more consistent narrative. At home, it's that plus everything else. There's a lot of, especially in Kansas City, Omaha, Des Moines, St. Louis, there's a lot of home market celebration, a lot we do in the community that feels hyper-local. Our work with the Kansas City Royals is a good example of that. That doesn't travel well, but where it is, it sells an absolute ton of beer for us, and it gives us something really special to grasp onto. But there are definitely two different strategies, not super different, but amplified at best.
Is it fair to say that you let the product, the Boulevard products, drive a lot of what you guys are doing on the marketing side?
Yes and and no. I would say we definitely lead with the product and the story behind it and where we think that moment is best consumed, whether it's camping or at a concert. We're kind of all about the moments, which is celebrated and first and foremost driven by the beer. But we, I would say that probably is where we kind of focus on, kind of the beer in the moment.
Sure. Neil, letting moments drive a lot of the marketing decision. I'm drinking a Sequench right now, but this is the beer of Warrior Dash. So what is it about that moment that Dogfish was attracted to, and how do you guys start to identify the occasions that you want to align your brand with?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll kind of speak to the process more than like what decisions we're actually making, but we have a term that we call the four-way win, and what that means is we make decisions based on what's right for the consumer, what's right for the brand, what's right for Dogfish, which is not the brand, it's what's right for our coworkers, because we consider that kind of an audience as well. And then we also think about what's right for our distributor and retail partners. And when we think about that, we have to kind of check the box in all four of those categories. And when we find something that does that, then we start to look at, what ROI does that deliver? Does that meet certain metrics that we think are attractive for the brand and make sense for all those groups involved?
So it kind of seems like you're taking more of a rifle versus a shotgun approach. You're highly selective about the types of partnerships that you want to get involved in, where you want to have your beer placed alongside which occasions. We see a lot of companies that are, so hungry to get their brand out in front of consumers that they're almost willing to say yes to anything. What are sort of the upsides and downsides of both approaches, being too specific or being not specific enough?
Well, I'm a believer that you have to stand for something or you stand for nothing. So, what we've done is we've been very thoughtful about, what consumer segments we're actively targeting. And, those consumer segments can be different by brand. For Sequench Ale, it's a different consumer segment than it might be for 60-minute IPA. So, those are all the decision factors that you have to think about when you're making, marketing decisions. We don't have the budgets that a lot of the competitors that have entered the market have. So, we have to squeeze as much juice out of every decision we make. It has to be impactful.
Yeah. Natalie, how about for you guys?
I think we really draw two different lines. In our core beers, these are beers that aid occasions. So the partnerships and the sponsorships that we enter into around those offerings really are about the occasions, and can they lift up that line of our offerings and really celebrate that? Does it aid the consumer? Does it add value? Is it a part of an experience that brings them joy? Is Boulevard's beer offering there an amplification of something that's really special? For our smokestack offerings, these are the beers that we position as the occasion. So our partnerships and sponsorships are viewed a little bit differently. We really focus on things that I would say amplify that occasion, but don't create the occasion as a whole.
So you use the word experience, and JC, I think that's a pretty appropriate word to describe a lot of how you guys approach what you do every single day. It's all about the experience. Can you explain for everyone here today what the Trillium experience is, as best you can without, having a Trillium beer in your hand and actually feeling it?
So Trillium is still very much in its infancy. For the longest time, we're operating out of our original location, which is effectively a shoebox in our Boston location. So to make a Seinfeld reference, it was kind of like the Soup Nazi experience. He'd come in, you make your order, you stand to the left, and you kind of get your beer and you go. We couldn't even offer people even the smallest taste because we didn't have a restroom for people to use. So not much of an experience other than the anticipation for what it's going to be like when you get there. We had since changed that when we did our expansion at our Canton location, built the tap room for the relative demand that we had and the space that we were able to secure for the lease. It made absolutely no sense to then use 4,000 square feet of that space for the tap room and retail experience. We should have dedicated the entire thing to production space. But that didn't feel right to me because people wanted to come and visit and spend time, and I didn't want them to have to wait in line outside in the rain, et cetera, et cetera. So we made lots of non-intuitive business decisions that felt right as a customer. So it's sort of a long way of saying that even though we're really quite new, I always have an eye to what I would want if I was a customer from Chilium, not only in the experience once you arrive, but the anticipation when you're going, once you're there, and the food truck offerings and the music that we're playing, and the tap room associates that are kind of saying the words that I would say if I was there with them.
Seems like you sort of trust your gut for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, we started Chilium with one full-time employee. I kept my regular job for about 2 years after we opened, and didn't have a heck of a lot of time to sit down and write things out and vet them with a team and so on and so forth. You didn't really have the time for those kinds of things. I had to do things that felt right intuitively, and maybe it's the instincts that have gotten us to this point, and it certainly led to lots of business mistakes, but they turned out...
Such as?
Not being able to make enough beer to meet demand.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Something that a lot of breweries struggle with, I'm sure.
Right. But we should have contract brewed, right? But that didn't feel right to me, so we didn't do it.
Right. How do you scale that? How do you, if you're trusting your gut, and at some point, you get to a point in your life cycle where you maybe need to turn over some of that decision making to somebody else, how does it scale if you're not the one pulling the trigger?
Well, that's what Esther and I are always going to be the one making those decisions. So we don't have investors to make sure we're maximizing our returns. We have vision, and we've set a strategy towards achieving that vision. And even though that the business decisions might not be the most efficient way to make the most money, it'll be what we feel is the most efficient way to maintain that ownership to achieve that vision.
And so much of what you guys do is based on the beer itself. I think your partnership, the beer garden on the Greenway, was really about just giving people in Boston their first outdoor beer garden experience last year. And now you've got a lot of competition in that space this summer. Everybody is jumping in and getting into the beer garden game. As more and more, and this is a question for all of you, as more and more craft breweries begin to execute partnerships at, say, the sporting level with the Royals or with the White Sox, and craft breaks through to those opportunities, I feel like each of those experiences that you're trying to deliver, it's going to be tougher and tougher. Have you guys thought about the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, and how those things might change and what you guys might do when they do change? Sure.
So we signed the agreement with the Royals last year. This is year 2 for us. It's off to a rocky start, sadly, but based on the team and the weather. We were really excited by this. This was a huge opportunity for Boulevard to have this sponsorship as the official craft beer of a Major League Baseball team. And when we looked around, it was really cool and really terrifying because there was not a roadmap. There was no exact playbook for how to do this as a craft beer and feel like we kept our authenticity and who we were, but integrated a team into our narrative, something very big, something very polished. So last year was really heavily focused on getting the stadium and the experience at the stadium to be this immersive Boulevard experience. We were really lucky in that how we created this was 6 different locations in Kauffman Stadium. Every one of them felt like a little part of the Boulevard Beer Hall or our Tours and Rec Center or us, essentially. Everything was polished. We got a lot of time training the team at Kauffman. We had a really, really strong focus on what the beer was and what we were talking about and what we wanted the team to deliver. So at the end of the day, the Boulevard experience at that stadium felt as close as we could possibly make it to someone actually coming to visit our brewery just a few miles away. Fast forward a little bit, and I think as we enter year 2, year 3, 4, 5 of this relationship, it's about how else we can partner with it that is writing the narrative for craft beer. And that's exciting. Sometimes you're pulling levers that feel a little big beer, but we're trying to find interesting and new and very authentic ways to do it. So
Can you give us an example of one of those levers that feels like big beer?
yeah, I mean,
And I'm assuming it's not like paying for a tap handle, because that never happens.
No, never. No, I mean, we're lucky in the stadium. We have hundreds and hundreds of handles in the stadium. You go there, and it feels like a Boulevard destination. We're really fortunate for that, and so much of that has to do with the city. That really embraced us. But outside of it, how we leverage that, I would say, to retail is a good example. So whether it's ticket giveaways, this is the Royals' 50th year anniversary, so we're doing a big thing with them, leveraging a lot of their partnerships and their other sponsors in giveaways and in parties and tailgates. Some of it feels at sometimes a little formulaic, but we're trying to put our special spin on it, and at the end of the day, make it feel really us. And how we do that ultimately is really stellar execution with our retailers, really amazing prize experiences with our fans. When they win something, they feel totally immersed and feel like Boulevard's giving them a big giant hug of win. So at the end of the day, I think it's worked really well for us, and we're going to keep figuring out the right way to do it. It's not a perfect playbook, and I don't think we have the answers, but we're charting the course in some capacity, and we have good company.
Yeah, and I think that balance of, authenticity or doing something that feels authentic to the brand or is authentic to the brand, balancing that with some of the more structured promotional marketing tactics that have been deployed over the years by larger companies can be sort of a tricky tightrope to walk. Neil, you guys at Dogfish have done a pretty incredible and remarkable job over the years of always remaining really authentic to the brand of Dogfish. How have you maintained that authenticity as you guys have grown? And how do you continue to maintain it as you get sort of more mature in everything that you do?
Yeah, I would say, probably 2 years ago, we started asking ourselves what the definition of off-centered is. Off-centeredness is at the center of who we are as a brand. And it was one of those things, it was nice that all of our coworkers kind of had this different definition of what off-centeredness was, and we still want to maintain that. But for our consumers, we wanted it to be a little bit more authentic. I think we wanted it to be a little bit more consistent, so that we could spread that out, whether it was regionally or nationally, maybe internationally at some point. So, I think, as you were saying, Natalie, I think you kind of know when something fits nicely. And for me, as I look at, you guys being at Kauffman Stadium, it feels right. You guys are a Kansas City brand, and it's nice to know that consumers have embraced that. We have a few sponsorships like that we feel like is just a natural fit. We're the sponsor of the Firefly Music Festival, which is right up the road in Dover, Delaware. It's the biggest music festival on the East Coast. And we've seen research from Red Frog Events who come back to us and they say, you guys are such an important part of this festival. And we try to leverage that into, getting more out of that event and extracting as much value out of it as possible. But I think it really comes down to, getting as much value out of it, from a variety of different angles, so that you can integrate your social media, you can integrate your PR, you can activate it at retail. The more that you can kind of put that event or that sponsorship at the center of the page and have all these like kind of tentacles coming out from it, that's where you get the most value. And again, it's a competitive space, limited budgets. You have to do that on a daily basis.
Yeah. So I got a couple follow-ups there. Can you provide us with an example of maybe something that's failed and why you think it failed or why it didn't work and why maybe it didn't feel, in hindsight, totally Dogfish?
Yeah, we dipped our toe into the water of bigger sports sponsorships. We sponsored the Philadelphia Union, which is an MLS team up in Philadelphia, obviously. And we got a pretty good response from consumers. We had our own little kind of beer garden area. I would say it didn't work. Soccer is an interesting sport. I'm a bigger fan of baseball because you can drink all 9 innings. With soccer, people show up early, they drink, and then they watch the game for 45 minutes. Watch the match, sorry. Got to use soccer terminology here. But they watch the match for 45 minutes, and then they go drink another beer, and they take that back. So there wasn't enough, honestly, there wasn't enough consumption for it to meet those metrics that we kind of outlined for that. And so, we fulfilled our obligation there, and then we went a different direction.
Yeah. JC, do you guys have a sort of core value at Trillium? Neil talked about having everybody at Dogfish explain what off-centered means to them. Is there something like that at Trillium? And if so, what is it? And how do you sort of bring that to life out in the trade?
It's funny. I was just talking to the orchestrated beer guys about this. Trillium was originally envisioned to be a farm and brewery someday. Kind of hard to imagine that as a 2,300 square foot space in the middle of Boston, a farm and brewery. It's kind of a silly concept. So 5 years isn't super long in the lifetime of a person, but that still remains, Esther, in my vision for what Trillium is to be. So it's a little bit hard to connect those dots between what it is that we're doing. We're commissioning a new canning line today, guys. It's all for the farm, It's a little bit hard to do that for the average person, So I know I kind of make the joke every once in a while to our team, and I say, "Oh man, we sold a lot of beer today. We're gonna get goats soon." It's kind of it's a funny thing, but I think there's just sort of a momentum around the excitement about what we're doing every day. That's kind of the day-to-day, week-to-week connection of what our team has to what Trillium is today and the eventual incarnation to that farm and brewery, and how it's sort of grown and blossomed to eventually have our flagship restaurant and brewery in Boston later this year, and then once again having that beer garden on the Greenway in this summer. It's not even, those things weren't even on our wish list, but over the course of the 5 years, they've grown into become those intuitive kind of milestones for us to reach to on a daily basis.
So you see those as sort of a means to an end, in a way?
No, it's just sort of the maturation for what Trillium, how it was originally conceived, and then how it's kind of grown and blossomed into its own thing. I think that if anybody had told me when we first started that we were going to have a 500-person beer garden in the middle of the city, I was like, that sounds great. There's no fucking way that's happening. There are no beer gardens in the city. That's not something that Boston would ever do. And it became an opportunity, and we say no, 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 and then, oh, wait, what's this thing? And we went for it, and last year, Boston had its first beer garden. That's incredible. And we got to celebrate that as a team, and it just felt right for everybody. So you can't necessarily carve out the path that you're going to lead in your life. I'd never imagined I was going to be sitting on a stage talking to folks about how we approach building a brewery.
Yeah.
And here I am.
How do you keep people within the company believing in your grand vision as you guys grow? I imagine that's got to be a pretty tough thing to accomplish the more people you add.
Yeah, like I said, we started with one person, and now we're at about 100, and we're about to add 100 more. So how do I maintain that personal, direct connection if I spend 10 minutes with each one of our team every week, and now it's going to be 200 people? It's sort of a very difficult thing to do. So the most that I can do is kind of have that direct, super tight connection with certain people in our team, know everybody's name, and then have that translated and propagated out to the rest of the team.
Yeah. You got to keep people believing in your vision. You got to make sure that everybody is on board with what you guys are trying to execute. And I think that for a lot of emerging, mid-size, breweries that are growing to sort of that next step, adding more people, potentially, new folks that are entirely new to the segment, haven't worked for a brewery before, that can be challenging. Natalie, do you guys have some strategies for onboarding folks with your vision and your the brand identity and articulating that internally so that when they go out externally, it's consistent?
Absolutely, and at the same time, not at all. I would say it is a lot of opportunity for improvement here. No, as someone who joined the brewery just a year and a half ago, I went through this and was a part of kind of a new wave of onboarding and training, and got to have a lot of analysis and recap and adjustment after the fact. We do a huge immersive brewery rotation, so everybody that comes on board at Boulevard or Duville USA spends time with every single department: brewing, production, packaging, supply chain, finance, tours and rec, marketing, sales, everyone. You spend time selling in the field, you spend time learning and appreciating our accounting team, so every single effort at the brewery is really appreciated and you understand who to go to. But when we talk about hiring, I would say first and foremost, so much of what we do is really about hiring great people, whether they've been in the field of beer or outside of it. Sometimes it's just about really excited, smart, genius, fresh blood, and making sure that they are fired up and they have the same entrepreneurial passion as the rest of us. Because when we hire great people, they inspire great people, and we make great products, and we do great things.
Neil, you guys have hired, what, like 80-something people in the last 18 months or so?
At least, yeah.
Yeah. How do you know that each one of those people out in the field are communicating, what you're creating in the marketing department that is Dogfish and everything that you want it to be? How do you ensure that those people are, sharing in your vision and communicating it out in the trade?
Yeah, two things. So we have an onboarding process that's pretty similar. So Cindy, our VP of HR, is here, and she created, with her team, created a day or a kind of a week, actually, for new coworkers called Carnival, where they spend time with departmental leads, and they get immersed in everything that is Dogfish. And it doesn't matter, what role you play at Dogfish, you participate in that program. And that's a great thing for onboarding people, teaching them about the brand, giving them education on beer. And I would say the second thing is, just keeping things really simple. I always think of things of like, that game of Secret, where you start with one place around the table and you pass it around the table and then you see what that statement was at the end. And, we work in a three-tier industry, and there are a lot of people at that table, and that message that you give at the beginning most likely will be different. So the more that you can simplify that, the better chance you have of that being consistent at the end.
That's a really great way of putting it. That game of Secret has got to be more challenging, especially now that the environment has changed so much. It used to be, a handful of established brands selling a few core products. Now it's 6,000 plus breweries selling 10,000 plus different SKUs to off-premise retailers, and each, some brands are in and out in a matter of weeks. And so that messaging and that articulation of that message can be a pretty dubious process, I would imagine. How do each of you guys ensure that you guys are kind of staying focused on what you need to stay focused on, everything is consistent, and how have the strategies changed as the marketplace has evolved, just to be more locally focused, more regionally focused with a bunch of different SKUs as opposed to more nationally focused with a handful of SKUs?
Hang on, let me take a drink here. More liquid truth serum, please.
We're empty.
Yeah, so, again, it is about simplification. What we've done is we've narrowed down, our annual production calendar to fewer brands. The challenge there is when you delete a brand from your production calendar, you gotta find a way to fill that void from a volume perspective. But I think it's a bit counterintuitive. It takes guts to make that decision, but I think time will prove that by making those gutsy decisions and providing focus to all those people that are in that chain of communication, you're probably going to find more success at the end.
You guys are adding brands, though, right, Natalie?
Yes, Yes and no. I mean, we're definitely trying to go at it with the same level of focus, and I think where we're adding, we are definitely deleting at least one or two, making bets on volume and GP and opportunity of the future versus what was in the past. But similarly, I would say I think where we have been able to drive the most focus and for our company has been really creating innovation paths. So when we know, our brewers are so awesome and they're creating such beautiful, amazing beers, and it's finding places for those beers to go, whether it's our tasting room into our test series or our tasting room series, which sounds insane that I just said that, in our sample packs, our Brewer's Barrel series, all kinds of different things. I think we've found channels for all of these innovations that are efficient, that don't kind of bottleneck the system, if you will, for our distributors and our sales team.
So I know we've only got a few more minutes together up here, and I want to get a couple more questions in. Thank you to the beer runners. So the one question I really did want to hit on, show of hands, how many brewery owners or brewery reps are in the room today? Perfect. How many of you guys, in some way or another, rely on a founder story for a lot of what you guys send out to consumers, and talk about how you started as a core piece of your marketing? Show of hands. So, and I think that's, that's something that everybody kind of leans on initially, and all of your brands at one time or another, and perhaps probably still to this day, lean on the founder to some respect. So I guess my question would be, if I had to ask it to Neil, and I'll ask it to all you guys, but how do you avoid putting Sam Calagione in all of your marketing videos? Do we? Yeah. Especially as you guys grow and you start to pull away from that founder story so that consumers can become attached to the brand as opposed to the personality.
So, for us, Sam is an asset. Is that good that I called you an asset, or is that bad? Yeah. And I'll fill you guys in on a secret. There's actually 3 Sams. You've seen them around a lot. There's 3 robots.
This is like Westworld. Yeah.
No, really, Sam is an asset for us, and so we try to utilize that at the right times. We're active on social media. I think most craft breweries are. So when Sam has time, and it does require a lot of planning on our part to get time on his calendar and make sure that we get good content out of that time that we have with him. But it is part of it's part of who we are as Dogfish. Sam is consistently, I'll repeat something that Sam said many times. He's our analog voice. Mariah has been our digital voice for a long time. So Sam is the guy who's talking to people, and he's online. And that's something that we want to accentuate in the future. I think we'd be silly if we didn't. So we're doing things with Men's Health Magazine, where we're creating custom content that Sam is kind of the star. We're working with Complex and First We Feast to bring back a series called That's Odd, Let's Drink It, where Sam is the host of that. And it is Dogfish centric, but it's also promoting craft beer as a category. So,
you're doubling down on it, it seems.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Boulevard, obviously in a little different situation, especially since John sold the brewery a number of years ago. As you guys have kind of stepped back and pulled away from him as sort of the personality and the spark behind the brand, what's changed, and how has it changed for the better, and what's that process been like?
Sure. I think it's been a really fascinating one. John McDonald was an amazing founder and remains a really steady moral compass for the brewery today. He still comes in. He still has his arms in a lot of things, and we're very, very lucky for that. And I wouldn't say it's a big but, we're on to the next phase, but it's an and. We have the opportunity to write the next chapter with him a part of it, and him shepherding what we do and how we do it, and really giving his opinions. And we're really lucky because we have the benefit of having a founder who's ready to step back and not be present, but who's guiding us into the next step and ready for that to happen, which is humbling and awesome.
JC, you've talked to me about just the work-life balance and wanting to maintain some sanity even as you guys grow. And you are very heavily involved in the business, obviously, and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. And I think you said last week, like, you don't want to put a tap room in Chicago or San Francisco because that would just pull you in a bunch of different directions. And I'll go on the record and say you probably should, because I think those would succeed and do quite well in those markets. But for you, I mean, you did have a big piece of the brand. So much of the brand was built around what you and Esther created. So as you guys grow and the brewery grows and you guys get a little bit older, how do you let Trillium exist as Trillium, or maybe it is already?
Well, we've tried to start to do a little bit of the separation, where it sounds kind of simple, but we just kind of created our own separate Instagram pages for either of us. But of course, they're Mr. and Mrs. Trillium. So we're just so intrinsically wound up with what it is. And I never felt comfortable with people coming up to me and asking me about, hey, how'd you do this? This is great. And what did you do? And what about this? And I want your opinion, and you and you and you. I always felt uncomfortable with that because I just wanted people to appreciate the place and the beer that we had brewed. So I never set out for any kind of beer celebrity status or anything like that.
Well, then I'm sorry we put you in front of 350 people here.
Yeah. Not to say that it's not like completely awesome. It's just it was never a goal of mine necessarily, and I kind of tend to come back a little bit to that. But kind of driving into work one day, Esther and I were talking about, so where does Trillium stop and we begin? And it's we're kind of woven into it. So ultimately, I think what does that mean for Trillium is it's kind of the for a lot of people. It's the embodiment of the American dream, and it's the husband and wife team pursuing what they love, and it just taking off like a rocket. And a lot of people can identify with that, and it's such an incredible thing. So I don't know that there will ever be a true separation, because that is our story. And how does that evolve over time? It's just like I never thought we'd have a beer garden, and we're doing it again this year. Am I going to sit on the stage more and talk about the American dream more? Maybe. I don't really have a marketing plan. Can you tell?
That's it.
I just want to have some goats.
It's very Jim Cook-esque of you. He doesn't have an exit plan. It's just to die, I think, is what he says, right?
Yeah. Hopefully our kids want the brewery someday. I know you hear a lot of brewery owners say that, but that's kind of the plan.
Yeah. Well, one final question for you guys. What has been, and totally non-marketing related, just a soundbite to leave everyone with before they go get another round of beers and we bring our next panel up? What has been one, sort of surprising development in 2018, just in the craft category in general, that you guys have paid attention to? And maybe one piece of advice that you'd leave with everyone today, marketing or otherwise? I'll start with Neil.
Let's see. One interesting development and one piece of advice.
Yep.
We had some meetings with distributors today, and I'll say it's an interesting thing, but it's a really good thing. I'm hearing distributors get really interested and involved in the health of brands and the marketing of brands, and I think it's really on both suppliers and distributors to build strong brands. And I think that's what's going to, really help the beer industry long term. Strong brands are going to lead to a strong category. So I'm hearing that from distributors. I think there was maybe a time where there was this separation of breweries have to own the marketing, and I'm hearing distributors get very involved in that, and that's a great thing. One piece of advice, I'd say planning. I mean, that's something that we think about a lot in marketing. JC and I were talking before the panel today, and you got to be thinking about what's happening a year from now, every day of the year. If you're thinking about what's happening next week or next month, that's already passed. So you got to be thinking about what's happening a year from now, because that's the timeline that we work on. That's the timeline of selling things in properly. That's the timeline of communicating things properly. That allows you to simplify that communication process.
I'm only thinking about what's happening in like 45 minutes from now, so I guess I'm screwed. Natalie, one piece of advice for our audience and one surprising development this year that you've noticed.
You know, I would say one surprising development I've noticed has really been kind of the disconnect between, I would say, what we have as an industry created for consumers' drive for new beers, new limiteds, new seasonals, new, and the pressure from our distributors and retailers finally saying uncle. I think at some point too much is too much. So how we manage that as an industry is something that I'm anxious to be a part of, and hopefully collectively we will solve. One piece of advice I would say, I'm going to credit back to John Kane of Central States in Kansas City, our fantastic distributor. He is such an inspiring guy, but said it best, we have to get back to romancing beer. We have to get back to talking about quality and taste and occasion and proper glasses and clean glasses and pours, and I think there's something so beautiful about that. So that's how I believe as an industry we're going to get back to health, getting back to romancing beer.
And JC, the final word.
So I think one of the surprising things that happened to me this year was sort of so some of the old guard kind of pushing back for so long and then kind of flipping the other way and then doing national hazy beer. We were getting stomped on for so long about this ridiculous beer they were making, kind of quietly and sometimes not so quietly, and then to see it kind of flip the other way was maybe not surprising because you can only ignore what was happening for so long. So that was kind of cool, but a little scary at the same time for us. And a piece of advice, I think it is to take what your historical perspective is and accelerate that by about 3 to 4x about what's happening. I think in the comments that you're making about the new, what was available last week is already old. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I've had people come up to me and say, oh man, I love this beer, I love this beer. Like, that's great, we have it. Then they turn around and say, well, what else do you have? It's unbelievable. Like, people will say, this is my favorite beer, what else do you have?
I don't envy you.
It's fun, because it allows me to continue to pursue this myriad of ideas that I still have not yet run at yet. It's not an endless road either, so that's also a little scary.
So get back to romancing beer, accelerate your timeline, and plan accordingly. Those are the takeaways. Guys, this has been brilliant. Thank you. Round of applause for our first panelist. So I'm sure everyone needs a beer. Let's all go have a beer for the next 20 or 30 minutes, and we'll reconvene.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets OBeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before OBeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes. I would say that OBeer absolutely pays for itself.
OBeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love OBeer.
Brew Talks is a traveling meetup series for beer business professionals that are already attending industry gatherings like the Craft Brewers Conference, the National Beer Wholesalers Association Next Gen event, and the Great American Beer Festival. Brewbound, together with our friends at Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, will be hosting 3 Brew Talks meetups in 2018, as well as 3 more in 2019. But this year, our first one will be on May 1st in Nashville, Tennessee during the Craft Brewers Conference, and then we'll head to Austin, Texas in August, co-located alongside the NBWA Next Gen event, and September will be in Denver, Colorado during the Great American Beer Festival.
Dogfish has been a long-time supporter of Brew Talks, and now that we're actually collaborating on the series, it feels awesome because old world beer communication was like monologuing, billboards, radio ads, TV ads. In the new world, it's about dialogue and communicating, and these events are awesome forums for that communication.
From growing really quickly comes at a serious cost, and when I was at Dogfish, I heard that a lot, but I've learned it personally. And when you're distracted on growth and new markets or anything but what's happening day in, day out with your brewery, with your beer, and with your people, then you're not focused on the right things, because it's those 3 things that matter the most in the long run.
The Brew Talk series is attended by brewers, distributors, retailers, investors, suppliers, and they're all showing up to hear honest discussions on the state of the beer industry and to network with one another.
So the industry is changing so quickly, and these events are so important because we're at this really dynamic, tumultuous moment in craft beer, and no one wants to go through this moment like in a funnel without widening their view and seeing what else is out there and learning from each other. And that's what this is going to be a chance to do, to sit down with our peers, in some ways our fellow competitors in the marketplace, but we're going to learn a lot from each other in this series, that's for sure.
Work your tap house. It's the most profitable thing you can do. Work your tap house. Measure revenue per barrel. Volume's important, but dollars per barrel is the most important thing you can do.
Reality is it's getting tougher to get to market. And we've got to have brewers be able to start, continue to innovate, be able to get in this business. That's what's created a lot of profitability in the business. If the craft beer renaissance had not occurred, distributors would not be making the profitability they were today. And I think all my friends who are distributors in the room will admit that.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets OBeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before OBeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that OBeer absolutely pays for itself.
OBeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love OBeer.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before Obeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes. I would say that Obeer absolutely pays for itself.
Obeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love Obeer.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before Obeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes. I would say that Obeer absolutely pays for itself.
Obeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love Obeer.
Brew Talks is a traveling meetup series for beer business professionals that are already attending industry gatherings like the Craft Brewers Conference, the National Beer Wholesalers Association Next Gen event, and the Great American Beer Festival. Brewbound, together with our friends at Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, will be hosting 3 Brew Talks meetups in 2018, as well as 3 more in 2019. But this year, our first one will be on May 1st in Nashville, Tennessee during the Craft Brewers Conference, and then we'll head to Austin, Texas in August, co-located alongside the NBWA Next Gen event, and September will be in Denver, Colorado during the Great American Beer Festival.
Dogfish has been a long-time supporter of Brew Talks, and now that we're actually collaborating on the series, it feels awesome because the old world beer communication was like monologuing, billboards, radio ads, TV ads. In the new world, it's about dialogue and communicating, and these events are awesome forums for that communication.
From growing really quickly comes at a serious cost, and when I was at Dogfish, I've heard that a lot, but I've learned it personally. And when you're distracted on growth and new markets or anything but what's happening day in, day out with your brewery, with your beer, and with your people, then you're not focused on the right things, because it's those three things that matter the most in the long run.
The Brew Talk series is attended by brewers, distributors, retailers, investors, suppliers, and they're all showing up to hear honest discussions on the state of the beer industry and to network with one another.
So the industry is changing so quickly, and these events are so important because we're at this really dynamic, tumultuous moment in craft beer, and no one wants to go through this moment like in a funnel without widening their view and seeing what else is out there and learning from each other. And that's what this is going to be a chance to do, to sit down with our peers, in some ways our fellow competitors in the marketplace, but we're going to learn a lot from each other in this series, that's for sure.
Work your tap house. It's the most profitable thing you can do. Work your tap house. Measure revenue per barrel. Volume's important, but dollars per barrel is the most important thing you can do.
Reality is it's getting tougher to get to market. And we've got to have brewers be able to start, continue to innovate, be able to get in this business. That's what's created a lot of profitability in the business. If the craft beer renaissance had not occurred, distributors would not be making the profitability they were today. And I think all my friends who are distributors in the room would admit that.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before Obeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that Obeer absolutely pays for itself.
Obeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love Obeer.
Brew Talks is a traveling meetup series for beer business professionals that are already attending industry gatherings like the Craft Brewers Conference, the National Beer Wholesalers Association Next Gen event, and the Great American.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets OBeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before OBeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that OBeer absolutely pays for itself.
OBeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love OBeer.
Brew Talks is a traveling meetup series for beer business professionals that are already attending industry gatherings like the Craft Brewers Conference, the National Beer Wholesalers Association Next Gen event, and the Great American Beer Festival. Brewbound, together with our friends at Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, will be hosting 3 Brew Talks meetups in 2018, as well as 3 more in 2019. But this year, our first one will be on May 1st in Nashville, Tennessee during the Craft Brewers Conference, and then we'll head to Austin, Texas in August, co-located alongside the NBWA Next Gen event, and September will be in Denver, Colorado during the Great American Beer Festival.
Dogfish has been a long-time supporter of Brew Talks, and now that we're actually collaborating on the series, it feels awesome because the old world beer communication was like monologuing, billboards, radio ads, TV ads. In the new world, it's about dialogue and communicating, and these events are awesome forums for that communication.
From growing really quickly comes at a serious cost, and when I was at Dogfish, I heard that a lot, but I've learned it personally. And when you're distracted on growth and new markets or anything but what's happening day in, day out with your brewery, with your beer, and with your people, then you're not focused on the right things, because it's those 3 things that matter the most in the long run.
The Brew Talk series is attended by brewers, distributors, retailers, investors, suppliers, and they're all showing up to hear honest discussions on the state of the beer industry and to network with one another.
So the industry is changing so quickly, and these events are so important because we're at this really dynamic, tumultuous moment in craft beer, and no one wants to go through this moment like in a funnel without widening their view and seeing what else is out there and learning from each other. And that's what this is going to be a chance to do, to sit down with our peers, in some ways our fellow competitors in the marketplace, but we're going to learn a lot from each other in this series, that's for sure.
Work your tap house. It's the most profitable thing you can do. Work your tap house. Measure revenue per barrel. Volume's important, but dollars per barrel is the most important thing you can do.
Reality is it's getting tougher to get to market. And we've got to have brewers be able to start, continue to innovate, be able to get in this business. That's what's created a lot of profitability in the business. If the craft beer renaissance had not occurred, distributors would not be making the profitability they were today. And I think all my friends who are distributors in the room would admit that.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before Obeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that Obeer absolutely pays for itself.
Obeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love Obeer.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before Obeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that Obeer absolutely pays for itself.
Obeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love Obeer.
Brew Talks is a traveling meetup series for beer business professionals that are already attending industry gatherings like the Craft Brewers Conference, the National Beer Wholesalers Association Next Gen event, and the Great American Beer Festival. Brewbound, together with our friends at Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, We'll be hosting 3 Brew Talks meetups in 2018, as well as 3 more in 2019. But this year, our first one will be on May 1st in Nashville, Tennessee during the Craft Brewers Conference. And then we'll head to Austin, Texas in August, co-located alongside the NBWA Next Gen event. And September, we'll be in Denver, Colorado during the Great American Beer Festival.
Dogfish has been a long-time supporter of Brew Talks, and now that we're actually collaborating on the series, it feels awesome because old world beer communication was like monologuing, billboards, radio ads, TV ads. In the new world, it's about dialogue and communicating, and these events are awesome forums for that communication.
From growing really quickly comes at a serious cost, and when I was at Dogfish, I heard that a lot, but I've learned it personally. And when you're distracted on growth and new markets or anything but what's happening day in, day out with your brewery, with your beer, and with your people, then you're not focused on the right things, because it's those 3 things that matter the most in the long run.
The Brew Talk series is attended by brewers, distributors, retailers, investors, suppliers, and they're all showing up to hear honest discussions on the state of the beer industry and to network with one another.
So the industry is changing so quickly, and these events are so important because we're at this really dynamic, tumultuous moment in craft beer, and no one wants to go through this moment like in a funnel without widening their view and seeing what else is out there and learning from each other. And that's what this is going to be a chance to do, to sit down with our peers, in some ways our fellow competitors in the marketplace, but we're going to learn a lot from each other in this series, that's for sure.
Work your tap house. It's the most profitable thing you can do. Work your tap house. Measure revenue per barrel. Volume's important, but dollars per barrel is the most important thing you can do.
Reality is it's getting tougher to get to market. And we've got to have brewers be able to start, continue to innovate, be able to get in this business. That's what's created a lot of profitability in the business. If the craft beer renaissance had not occurred, distributors would not be making the profitability they were today. And I think all my friends who are distributors in the room would admit that.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets OBeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before OBeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that OBeer absolutely pays for itself.
OBeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love OBeer.
next panel. All right. I know folks are still getting their beers and still making their way back to their seats. But we do want to get the program started so that you guys can enjoy some live music somewhere tonight, drink some more beers, enjoy your CBC. Awesome. All right, so before we get started with the next panel, wanted to make a special presentation. I'm going to invite Sam Calagione up here from Dogfish Head. He's going to help me with this. So thanks to you guys out there, we were able to raise a significant amount of money for the Tennessee Craft Brewers Guild tonight. So this round of applause that you're going to give yourselves is for you. I didn't need to say that. It's for them. But we just wanted to say a very special thank you from me and Sam. Thank you guys for coming out tonight and supporting the Tennessee Craft Brewers Guild. And I think Anthony's here.
Is Anthony around? Oh, nice.
There he is.
Say a couple words about your guild and the work you guys are doing, and thank you guys for the hospitality.
So with your help, we were able to raise over $7,000 tonight, guys. Thank you. Now, yeah, share a couple words about the guild.
Just real quick, I just want to say thank you so much to Dogfish and all the sponsors tonight. We're really trying to build up our guild here in Tennessee. We're one of a few states that don't have an executive director yet, so we're trying to raise money, keep building up our guild. So this really helps us a lot as we continue to grow. And we'll be there soon with an executive director, and the BA has been so supportive of us, so thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That's all thanks to you guys, so thank you. Over $7,000 for the guild. Round of applause. All right, and without further ado, I'll just jump right in and invite all our panelists up right here. I think you guys all know Sam from Dogfish. He needs no introduction. We also have Dave Duffy from Brooklyn Brewery. Big round of applause. Charles Slezak from Lowe's Foods. And Dave Williams from Bump Williams Consulting Group. If he looks a little familiar, that's because he is Bump's son. He is the next generation of the Bump Williams Consulting Group. And I think we got you first, maybe. I don't know. Did we have you first?
My first. So I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
We are launching Dave into the world. So thank you for joining us. We're here to talk to these folks today a little bit about how the category is maturing, focused mostly on the retail segment. And I think everybody knows that it's getting tough, it's getting competitive, it's getting complex, and most of the discussions that we're having at Brewbound with our sources or friends in the industry or folks like Sam and Dave is really more focused on what's going to happen in the future, what's coming next. Now that all the major beer companies have their craft brands, how are they going to use them? What happens if the growth within craft continues to slow, or God forbid, there is no growth in craft? These are questions that everybody continues to ask us, continues to ask each other, and so we found it necessary to talk about it. It's safe to say that there's no shortage of questions keeping everyone in the industry across all three tiers up at night. So these folks are going to tell us what keeps them up at night, what they're worried about, what they're paying attention to, and we're going to be able to tap into all of their brilliant insight over the next 45 minutes. Before we get rolling, how many of you guys went to the general session today and were there? Okay, great. So I wanted to address one of the comments that Eric Wallace had.
from Left Hand, and he had made this comment, and I think that just the tone of the general session this morning in general was really about sort of the dividing line between big beer and independent beer, and supporting independent breweries and continuing to adopt the seal. I mean, that was the big takeaway for us. And Eric had said that acquired brands are weapons in the arsenal of the big breweries and used to control as much of the market as possible. And I'd like to get everyone's reaction to that right off the bat. So I will start with the person closest to me, Dave Duffy. Sorry, Dave.
That's completely uncool.
This was not in our pre-read. I'm dropping the mic.
Uncool. Did you guys hear that ABBA's getting back together? Can we talk about that? Okay, so there's no question that they have a lot of market power. There's absolutely no question of that. And I think that it's alarming and it's a little bit scary. And for sure, at chain level and at retail level, they have a lot of power. I still think that at the end of the day, it's about brands. And if we're doing a good job and doing things better as much as we possibly can, I think that's the path. This is a crazy time right now. In the industry life cycle, we're sort of at that top curve, and it's moving. It feels like it's sort of peaking a little bit. And this is the time in any CPG industry where you have to think about having good brands. And I think if we just do that, we can weather any storms as regards market power from organizations that are much larger than us.
Sam, what was your reaction to some of the comments today?
Well said. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend, but I heard good things about all the presentations at the general remarks this morning. You know, I would say, and you know, I am a past chairman of the Brewers Association's board, so I'm probably a little bit biased on this point. But I do very much believe in the independent shield and the initiative, but not in terms of who's a good person and who's a bad person. But I do think there's a lack of transparency that consumers really deserve to know who makes the brands that they're buying, and oftentimes the brands that they're perceiving as if they came from small independent breweries. I think they deserve to know, and then if they don't give a shit once they know that and they want to buy a beer just based on they like the label or they like the flavor or they like whatever, at least knowing, you know, where the money of that brand, where it's going, where it's coming from, I think consumers deserve to know that. So I do support the shield.
Charles, you have probably a unique perspective being a retailer. Do you feel that some of these larger corporately held craft brands are being used as weapons in the arsenal of big breweries and used to control the market as much as possible, or are you pushing back against them?
Well, I got to push back on that a little bit. I think Arsenal is a little aggressive. I don't know, am I alone? Alone here, Arsenal? I don't know. It's a little aggressive. I may be alone. That's all right. Hey,
our first Brewbound fist fight.
No, I like it. That's why I'm up here, right? Okay, fine, fair enough. Arsenal. So for me, when I talk to my guests and I look at my guests' purchasing patterns, for me it's about conversion, right? So converting out of the big domestic packs and the boring beers that are out there and trying something a little fun. So, you know, if they can do it, that helps us all, I think.
Interesting. Dave, you talk to a lot of brewers, big and small. Do you get the sense that there's concern about the future of quote-unquote crafty brands and what they might do to the marketplace and how they might disrupt things?
Well, I think when you look at the geographic locations where some of the acquired breweries exist, some of the styles that those brewers excel in, and you combine that with the sales force that the mega brewers have available to them, the relationships that they have in place with distributors, I can certainly see why it could be perceived as a threat. And I think the flexibility they have in a lot of areas that independent craft brewers don't, I mean, it'd be hard to say that it's not a potential threat down the road. And I think that is the view, and I think it has some water to that, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we've seen at least some brewers try to combat that threat is by, I guess, getting into their business and playing on their turf a little bit with some lighter lagers, some more sessionable offerings, larger pack sizes, 80-cent cans of domestic premium lager, which made some headlines earlier this year. You know, we've seen mid-sized breweries test out light beers for $6.99 a four-pack. I think it was Night Shift's new Nightlight beer. I went to their launch party a couple weeks ago, and they had, you know, hundreds of people waving glow sticks around and live music, all drinking light beer. And I thought, man, like I would have never predicted this when we started this whole Brewbound thing back in 2010. I would have never thought that I'd be at a light beer launch party for a mid-sized craft brewery cranking out maybe 30,000 barrels and everyone's waving glow sticks around. Did you guys ever envision that craft beer would be like this in 2018?
Short answer, no, at least not this quickly. I mean, any industry, as it gets bigger and it tries to attract more drinkers, you're going to start trying different things. You know, that's just inherent in trying to grow your business. I think it's happened a bit more rapidly in the last year and a half, 2 years than one might have expected. I think the pro to that is if it's getting people to start trying craft, drinking craft, you know, converting from other segments, other categories. So I think there is some silver lining to that. You know, the image of craft has evolved. It's going to continue to evolve. I think it's just a bit of a shock in terms of how fast it's happened.
Yeah, and Charles, you've seen some of that conversion in your store, have you not?
I have. So for me, I'm able to look at cart data and source of volume, and you know, I keep a close eye on these 15 packs. The Founders All Day, look at Dayblazer, Solid Gold, all of those. And interestingly, to me, is the number one item that my guests are leaving to go into these 15 packs. Sorry, Rick, but it's Miller Lite 24 pack. So number 7 on the list is Bud Light Suitcase, and so it's, you know, if it's converting some people, maybe it's doing the right thing.
Yeah, and we've heard the folks from Founders, Mike specifically, talking about kind of punching through the ceiling and, you know, introducing some of these different options for craft beer consumers and really trying to mainstream the category. Sam, I think you have a little different point of view on that. I know you have a different point of view on that, so let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and kudos to any brewery that finds a successful model to navigate this competitive moment. There's tons of unique models as valid as ours. It is my opinion, though, that you know, the prevalence of a buck of beer craft beer model, a $15 15-pack model, runs a very serious risk of commodifying and homogenizing craft. And you know, I get that there's a flavor bridge, and the majority of beer drinkers still live on light lager terra firma, and any step off of that flavor bridge to you know, an approachable, you know, white beer maybe made by a big brewery, marketed as a craft brewery or otherwise, could hopefully lead to people, you know, venturing further onto that flavor bridge. But I do also wonder, can we really qualify how many times the $15 15-pack buyer is actually coming from the other side of that flavor bridge, was drinking local independent beers, and came back towards that $15 15-pack that, frankly, I think economies of scale wise, only you know, a handful of international conglomerates can sustain that kind of pricing and still be able to reinvest in their brand, their people, and their community. So I worry about that.
Yeah. Dave, you guys at Brooklyn haven't gotten into the 15-pack game, but at 21st Amendment, you guys have just started dabbling in it. What's that experience been like?
It's new to Brooklyn. We with our new platform with the 3 breweries, the 15-pack that 21A does is a new thing. So forgive me, we're learning as we go on what we're seeing with this thing. There's no question that it has absolutely been relevant, and there's no question that the consumer finds it to be a value. And they define value lots of different ways. They define value in convenience, in quality, in brand, and price. They're defining it as a value. In the case of 21A, what they did was, and it's a $17.99 target. It's not discounted to distributors. And when they brought it out, their target was $17.99, $18.99, and then they were able to take their six-pack pricing upward. So as far as price erosion goes, together, I feel less like there's price erosion there. But I share the concern that everybody has over the long haul. But thus far, we've seen that the consumer has voted and said that they like the value, and it's good to hear that we have a tool that we can. It's about margin pool. It really is about margin pool, and we have to have opportunities and create opportunities to increase our share of the margin pool. I look at it a little bit like. I use the analogy of a football team. If you're a football team and you're playing against a much bigger and badder football team and you have no wide receivers, and they do. I feel like this gives us an opportunity and some tools to level the playing field a little bit, and be able to fight the good fight and try to gain share.
Does the pack size essentially just mean that brewers are giving away 3 free beers? And what do you risk when you do that? Sam, you guys have a little different approach on how you wanted to go with multi-packs and add value. So maybe talk a little bit about why you didn't take that road.
Yeah, I mean, we don't. I wish someone would invent a machine that would mix like beers into one 12-pack. If someone's in the room is super smart and can figure that shit out, that would be great. But it's a laborious hand project, for any scale brewery to do these mix packs. But the consumer has definitely spoken, regardless of price points. They love that variety. We first did it about 15 years ago. We did a mixed 12-pack in a generic brown box that we shut with duct tape that just had a UPC code in the duct tape, and it had 60, 90, and 120 minute. It came out in like 2007 or 2008, 2009, and it came with one of those paddle balls with a and it said, "Play this game and drink this beer until the recession's over." And it was $40-something a 12-pack because it came with 120 minute as part of the mix. So those days are behind us, unfortunately. But we still believe in the multi-pack, but we kind of feel like this could be a good opportunity to have a soapbox of a 12-pack that we can stand on and say, not every multi-pack has to be $15 a 15 case. So ours is we're coming out this summer with a mix pack that has 3 each of 4 of our most popular canned beers. It also has a koozie in every 12-pack, and the 12-pack origamis up into a cooler, a functional cooler. So we're trying to say, hey, look at all this value that we're adding. Come with us on this journey to a $21 12-pack instead of the $15 15-pack.
That's yeah. It's a noble quest. It seems like it's going to be a tough road to hoe.
Is it a soapbox or is it a shield?
Yeah. I don't know. Have you put the seal on your label yet? Bob Pease was asking. There you go. Dave, I wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, you have tremendous insight into the data behind this. So I asked the question, are brewers just giving away 3 beers for free? What do they risk when they venture into this territory? Essentially, you're trying to compete on an unfamiliar turf. And, I think the comment was made that a lot of these companies venturing into that space run the risk of being under-resourced and not being able to fight the fight long-term. What do you see in the data?
Well, I mean, it's hard to deny that 15-pack cans are growing. If I look at the IRI off-premise numbers, they're one of the fastest-growing pack sizes. That being said, with recent press of other big brewers expressing their interest in expanding their 15-pack portfolio or even alternate pack sizes, I mean, you're inviting that competition head on, and that's a battle you're going to lose, 10 times out of 10 as a small independent craft brewer. So, in terms of just fighting them head on, it's just going against kind of what craft has been and was, and just the image of craft in general. I mean, especially when you think about the fact that, craft beer in general is losing households. Trips to the store are down. So when you're looking at trying to grow craft, the only alternative left is increasing that basket ring. And when you're charging value prices, you're not growing the basket ring, you're giving it away. So it's kind of steering off that path that craft has been on, and it's going to be a hard battle to fight and win.
But at the same time, and I'll kick this one to Charles, at the same time, beer in general is losing share to wine and spirits. Craft has been the growth engine for a few years to kind of help offset some of that. But there is a real concern from a lot of folks in the industry that feel like unless we solve the volume issue, it's going to be real bad real quick. Charles, what's your thought?
That's a good point. I tell you what, and a point we didn't talk about a little bit earlier is when I look at the 15 packs, continuing on that, the frequency of purchase for us is not any less than a 12 pack. So it's, I don't know, it's, they're getting out there on a weekend, they're buying a 15 pack to get them through the weekend, and the frequency of purchase is there. So it's, maybe they're just finding other occasions, I suppose, during the week. So it's filling a niche. It's filling a niche for sure, and I think that the 15-pack buyer is different even than the well, certainly different than the 4 or 6-pack. I'll buy your $21.99 12 packs all day long.
Verbal contract, guys. Verbal contract.
I'm there. I'll do it
witness.
all day long. I'll do it all day long.
Ron, you following up on that? You're in the room somewhere.
But it's a different person. It's a different consumer, and so I think there's room.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to commodify, Sam, you don't want to commodify craft, but there is this volume issue that at some point I think the industry as a whole is really going to have to face. I'm curious, you know, how you feel about, as someone who owns and operates a distillery as well, how you feel about the continued loss of market share to wine and spirits, and you know what the beer industry needs to do collectively to address that.
First, thanks for reminding everyone I own a little distillery too. That's helpful for whatever I say next. But I will say we love.
We're all about facts, not alt facts here.
We do love our distilling business. It's a small part of our business. Dogfish Head's compass, like our why we exist, is to be very good as a beer-centric company. I won't bore you with the actual verbiage, but we are a beer-centric company. We're not only just in distilling. We have restaurants. We have a beer-themed hotel. But beer is the engine of our company. So you know, we have some concerns. You know, with well, what was the question again? Make sure I get that after the distillery point. Make sure I want to answer your question.
Sure. So, how will the beer category as a whole continue to sort of
okay,
claw back that share from wine and spirits?
Yeah. Now I'm back on track. So I gotta notice it. I'm good. Liquid truth.
Sam, remember in our promo video we said it was liquid truth serum all the way. You're proving the point right now.
I forgot. You know, I will say, you know, we are a beer-centric company. We want beer in general to be healthy, and I know I've been a big advocate of the Brewers Association's definition of indie craft, and I truly believe in that. But I also would love to see our world's biggest breweries that dominate market share in our country reverse their trends on their light lager juggernauts and compete strongly with with liquor and spirits that's taking share or liquor and wine that's taking share from all of us, particularly on premise. I think there's a great opportunity for all beer to figure that shit out on premise, because we are losing on premise collectively. That said, you know, I think a big part of why we're losing share is retail operators, smart retail operators on and off premise, understand that if they can build their models around trading people up, they're going to be more profitable. And frankly, beer is under-indexed in terms of its focus and execution up market. Dave, you and your dad have done some great work analyzing that. And you look at the stratification of pricing in beer or wine and spirits, and it's so much more skewed up. But the good news is trends are in the favor of the folks that are working to trade people up. All three tiers in this room and outside of it, where I think 75% of beer that's defined as craft beer by IRI is under $40 per case. That's only growing 1.8% year to date. And then you look at beers between $40 and $50, growing I think about 22%, and then over that somewhere close to 30%. So it's cool to see that growth trends, not volume right now, are bringing people up.
Yeah. How much of that is tied, and I'll kick this one to Dave, how much of that is tied to ABV, that pricing? And how do you solve the volume piece of it if you want to sell a $40 to $50 case of a 5% or, God forbid, less than 5% beer at such a high margin?
I think some of those, if you're talking ABV, the significantly higher, the extreme ABVs, I mean, those are on the high end of the price tiers. There's no arguing that. The special releases, those types of beers. But a lot of that growth Sam was talking about, the 40 to 50 to 60, on a case average to consumer, I mean, that's all, regular IPAs, average ABVs, the ones that people drink on a daily basis, and that's up 15, 20 plus % collectively. Some of that is also because a lot of new entries, are driving incremental sales to the category, but that's about a third. So most of that growth is coming from brands already in market, not extreme ABV, just, everyday IPA on the shelf. Probably a poor choice of words there. But just growing and growing organically by, improving their velocity, getting more facings at retail, things like that. So I think those brands have proven that they can grow, that price is not a deterrent to the average craft shopper. And if they can keep increasing their penetration at retail, at chains specifically, I think they've proven they can carry a load, and I think they have legs.
Yeah. Duffy, I'll kick this one to you. What have you seen through the development of the sales platform between Brooklyn and 21st Amendment and Funkworks, which, very unique, on their own unique brands that you're offering to the market at, of varying prices. What are you guys seeing that's performing really well, and how are you guys learning from one another to start applying it to, something that 21st Amendment learned, put it into Brooklyn, vice versa, Funkworks selling a, high-priced Saison? What are you guys learning from one another, and how are you guys evolving?
That's a huge question that I'm not really prepared to answer. What did we learn? Well, I think we've learned a lot from our partners. 21A has really taught us about portfolio focus. They really got 4 core brands. In Brooklyn, we have our Focus 5, which I think is a contradiction in terms, right? Like Focus 5, how do you focus on 5 things really? So we've learned from 21A and from Funkworks on really thinking about a smaller, tighter portfolio. I think that what we've all learned together is that this category has grown all these years really on brand introduction, and now we're at a place where we need to start thinking about brand development. We have to change our mindset away from rampant introduction of things after things after things, and we've created this monster. We really have. I mean, between 1.6 barrels and Rotation Nation, I mean, I think we're to blame for a lot of these woes that we have for a lot of things. We really are. So our focus now is to dial back, and for all 3 of us, really dial in and say, gosh, what are the 2 or 3 things that we have to do well from a brand perspective? Get away from this buckshot mentality, get to the rifle mentality, look at accounts, find the accounts that we feel like we can really build brands with. Let's have a conversation and a consulting-based discussion and say, let's build brands together. And we can do that when we have a portfolio for the 3 breweries where we have Belgians and Sours from Funkworks at $11.99, $12.99 6-packs, and we have 15-packs with 21A and Brooklyn Lager. We have a nice breadth. So we've learned that the width that we have portfolio depth with 3 breweries instead of having ungodly portfolio depth with 1.
Yeah. Charles, how eager are you to have companies like Dogfish, like Brooklyn, 21A, building brands in your stores?
Yeah, that means everything. So for us as a retailer, our guests are looking for that engagement, right? They're looking to hear the stories of Brooklyn, Dogfish Head. Tell us how that beer was made. Tell me about the hops. What went into the process. And so that's critical. So you narrow the focus, and you get that laser point going, and then it's great for everyone. Especially the boots on the street are so important.
Can you give an example of something that's really worked in your stores for all of us brewers in the room, like a POS or a program that's really worked?
Now I'm on the spot. So a great example is We're, as a retailer, we're unique in many ways, but we're fortunate to have an on-premise license. So now you can come into one of my stores and hang out and have a beer and shop if you want. But to the next level, what has really worked well is we'll do a beer dinner. So we'll get some items from around the store, tie in a little of our branding, a little bit of your branding, and we'll do the pairings in the store. And then the next time they're in the store, they'll never forget. They're like, the craziest thing just happened to me. I can't believe I was in here, I was having a beer, and I did these pairings with that, and that beer over there was fantastic. So it means a lot.
So creating an experience off-premise for folks to really understand and grasp what craft beer is all about. And who are your consumers, Charles? Are they mostly sort of the mainstream shopper that's just getting involved in craft? Is it high-end folks that are very familiar with it? Who are your shoppers?
Oh yeah, so yes, yes, and yes. So we've been very fortunate. We've built up our craft business over the years. We're now at 40% sales, including draft of IRI, defined craft. Sorry,
that's awesome.
So not too bad. Not
Here,
too
here.
bad. So that's pretty good. That's pretty strong, and I still see it. Thank you.
You can applaud. Yeah.
Nationally. Thank you, Jenna. You're the best. Thank you,
Now,
Chuck.
She deserves the.
Yeah.
So thank you. Cheers.
We'll share, Chuck. Do you want to have a sip? Do you want to drink it? You can drink it. You want to drink it?
I drink out of all.
We're getting full over here.
So back to the question, even though we're heavy craft, I mean, it's luckily pints sell really well at our store, but Bud Light suitcase, that's the number 2 item in the store. So
Behind craft beer pint.
That's right.
I like saying that.
Yeah, that's right. So there's plenty of work. It's still about conversion for me, and once I can get a guest to try a beer with some taste, then they're in.
Yeah.
They're good to go.
Charles, you're on-premise, you're off-premise. One thing you aren't is on-premise. You're not a brewery opening a satellite tap room or operating a satellite tap room. You're not making your own beer. And we heard from JC earlier on the last panel. I mean, 95% of his beer going direct to consumer. Dave, I'll kick this question to you. I mean, how much has that phenomenon, the direct to consumer sales piece of the business, which has really emerged as one of the most robust pieces of growth, especially for the long tail of craft brewers, and I think Bob said it today. I mean, it is sort of ground zero, I think is what he said, for the growth of the category overall. How much has that disrupted what's happening on and off premise, and how much are you seeing from retailers or hearing from retailers potentially pushing back on it?
I think it varies. It depends. I mean, in terms of scale and how it's disrupted things, I think the latest estimates from Bart were about almost 3 million barrels direct to consumer from these breweries. So it's massive. It's a massive scale. So how can it not disrupt things a little bit? But when we talk to our retail partners, they have kind of differing views on it. If they're open on hours, if they're selling below prices that it's available on the shelf, well, then that's kind of undercutting them, and they view it as a direct competitor. On the flip side, you can also view it as building the brand. So beer drinkers go out, they go to the tap room, they have a pint, enjoy it. Well, now they know what to look for next time they're shopping at the store. So there's differing views on it. It really depends on how many tap rooms does that one brewer have. Is it only in their local market, or have they started to expand into different markets, different states, different areas? So I think in terms of how retailers view it, it probably varies based on where they're located. But I think there's a lot of pros and cons to it too, because it makes craft beer very approachable. Some of them are even family friendly. It creates occasions. You can bring people in there, and it introduces people to craft beer.
But it's sucking volume out of 3-tier.
It is, but you could try to put a positive spin that it's also building brands, building awareness, encouraging new drinkers to convert. So, it's tough for me to say I'm not a retailer, but from as objective as I can be a perspective, there's pros and cons to both sides of that.
Dave, talking about ground zero, you're in Brooklyn. Brooklyn hasn't gotten too deep into that area of craft. You've avoided it. Why? And what's your thought on how you move forward in the future regarding tap rooms?
We're watching really, really closely. I mean, this is still pretty much a new thing. I mean, I would call it new in the arc of our industry. Brooklyn, when the Brooklyn neighborhood, I think that what you said, Dave, is totally right. It is absolutely situational. It depends on the city you're in, depends on the competitive landscape. There's a lot of dynamics, so there is no one-size-fits-all answer. But for Brooklyn, when the Brooklyn neighborhood was developing and when it was like not safe to hang out there, it was really about bringing people into the neighborhood and validating it as a place that you could go and not get shot, right? Unless you wanted to get shot. And there are people that want to get shot. So
you don't know these people anymore. I'm
no,
guessing.
they're all dead.
Yeah.
Dark web.
They're all dead.
It's on the dark web, guys.
So at the time, we wanted to make sure that we were not competing with our competitors in the or other restaurants in the neighborhood. So we have always closed at 7 o'clock in Brooklyn since until this week, where we've begun to renovate our tap room. And now that the neighborhood has developed, now that there's a lot more retailers, it has been validated as a really cool little location, then a lot of the folks, and they're still operating, they've been operating for a long time, they're thankful for all the effort that's been done, and our sense is that there will always be people that are going to take you off draft in the neighborhood, but folks have been pretty cool about the fact that we're going to expand our hours a little bit later.
Sam, is it short-term thinking? Is it long-term thinking? Is there something everybody's missing when we see companies expanding with satellite locations and investing more on the retail side of on-premise tap room? Or, I mean, I just feel like in 20 years we're going to look back on this and, kind of wonder why we didn't see it, however it ends up being.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the second shakeout moment, Mariah and I have lived through with our coworkers. This happened in the late 90s too. There really wasn't a tasting room-oriented brewery model in that era of a shakeout, but it's sort of similar dynamics. For this moment, I'm very thankful for that model, and Dogfish Head sells about 99% of our beer through our distribution partners, but we started as a brew pub, and that still is our R&D, epicenter, where we learn through that immediate engagement with our customers, what we're evolving to bring out to national distribution, and maybe that's our own definition of what we should aspire to. If we can stay in that high 90% through distribution, I think we're taking care of our partners in distribution first, but we're still able to have that engagement with consumers that it influences our creative process and our R&D process. But I'm glad that mall exists. There's a ton of sampling that comes along with it, a ton of beer education and excitement on every town level that comes with it. So I'm glad it exists.
You were talking about starting as a brew pub. At that time, you were one of a handful of breweries that existed, and now we're 6,000 plus breweries, most of which have a taproom component. And so the landscape is completely different, which I think changes how retailers view it. And everybody's numbers that we see suggest that more companies are getting into the space. It's not stopping at 6,300. We're headed towards 10,000. A lot of those are going to have tap rooms. Inevitably, they're going to suck volume out of 3-tier. Are
you going to suck volume out of 3-tier, or are they going to help beer compete more with wine and spirits?
And I guess that's the ultimate question. Is it creating a new occasion and a new beer drinking occasion? Or is it just slicing the pie even thinner?
I will say, it isn't the difference between this moment and the late 90s is I really feel like it's the consumer cares about craft, gets craft now, whereas back then we didn't know what was happening. And I'll say that there's a phenomena now that I'll call smiling mouth, jaws of death, which is this is good. This is making us competitive. This is why we decided to be entrepreneurs, this competitive moment. But there are, I think, jaws of death. And the bottom jaw, frankly, is more of those taproom-oriented breweries that can kick ass because they're in control of their sales, and they keep so much margin by selling across the bar. So many of those business units, if their quality, consistency, and well-differentiated focus, are going to weather this storm with grace and aplomb. And then there's the higher jaw, the jaws of death, where you have to be a fairly scaled brewery to be interested in multi-state distribution. And it's going to be a lot harder to be in between those two business models than it was when we lived through what we lived through in the last 90s. And there's always going to be awesome anomalies from, the Vale in Richmond, or I'm looking at John from Trogs. I think they're up over 100,000 barrels, only selling in a few states. So there's always going to be these great ones in between, but there's going to be fewer in between than there were in the late 90s, I think.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You brought up the question of whether or not these tap rooms are creating new occasions, and I want to hear from each of our panelists today. What occasions is beer missing right now, and how can we capitalize on those occasions as an industry? And I'll start with Dave.
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I think craft beer, the benefit is it offers so many styles. I think the challenge is just getting drinkers to understand that different styles can fit different occasions. Where drinkers currently might lean toward an import for certain occasions, or might lean toward a premium for let's say preparing for a large sporting event in a parking lot somewhere. I think it's just educating consumers that there are styles of craft beer that exist that can fit that to a T. It's just getting the word out, getting those brands available, whether it's on shelf at retail, or in independent store, anything, just to get that message out. And I think it's just educating consumers. Again, I mean, this is the mantra that we've talked about for years now, educating consumers of the versatility of craft and how it can fit those occasions that might currently now be dominated by other segments of the category.
Yeah. Charles, what opportunities are craft brewers missing in your store, or in your stores, I should say?
Wow, so good question. So as far as opportunities, there is just like Dave was saying, there's a wide variety that's out there. A lot of the growth that, or some other growth that I'm seeing out there that maybe could be hard to get into. I've seen a lot of growth from seltzers. So a lot of seltzers going on out there, a lot of growth, using those as mixers.
Alcoholic seltzers or not?
Yes, the alcohol. So the Trulies, the Spike Seltzers, Smirnoff, all those have been growing really well. So maybe there's an opportunity. So that's a stretch. That's a little bit of a stretch for us. One of the other opportunities, probably the most troubling for me, I think I might be jumping ahead in terms of things that keep me up at night, but the innovation that I've seen from the big places, the ABs and Miller Coors houses, has been big this year. A lot of innovation, and one thing that we should probably take a little bit of a look at is Bud Light Orange. It's selling like crazy right now, so put that out there. I'm going to plant that seed. I
won't believe it.
Something with that, all right?
I won't believe it.
Seriously?
I refuse to believe it, Charles.
It's troubling. It's troubling. I'll just say that. So, okay, you guys, there it is. Run.
I would challenge the group by saying that the occasions that we're missing are the ones that we haven't created yet.
So what are they?
Ooh, is that deep as shit or what?
You go, Duffy.
All right, embrace debate, Duffy. What are they?
Yeah, I have to go.
Create an occasion for us here today.
This is an incredibly creative group of people. I mean, over the last 30 years, and it's amazing what we've done. And I mean, I see events that are, with dogs that raise money for charities, and if we are creating compelling events, whether they be better festivals or better fundraising activities, we can outdo the big guys by creating events and activities that are far more compelling, but also authentic. So what are those? I'll leave it to the group to create those, but I think that they're out there. We just need to put our thinking caps on and make them.
Yeah. So we have to create occasions, but we also have to protect them as well. I think I saw the other day that like Jack Daniels was sponsoring a PGA Tour event, and I don't know about anybody else who's golfed, but I drink beer when I golf. And that struck me as one of these sort of signifiers that, hey, beer is also losing ground in some areas, and it's maybe taking its eye off the prize in some respects. What are some occasions that beer is not doing a good enough job of protecting, and how can we win those back?
I mean, I think right now beer is under fire in terms of calories, carbs, things like that. I mean, a lot of the messages that you see on TV now are directly combating the fact that, beer will put a gut on you, beer will do this to you, beer will do that. So I think it's not the occasions that, I think we're just losing occasions that beer already had a foothold in, and now people are starting to think like, oh, well, health conscious, trying to eat better, trying to live better, trying to do this, everything better. I think beer's under fire right now from that angle as well, and that's also troubling.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes left before we're wrapping up here, so I want to shift gears slightly with a couple final questions. I think one of the more noteworthy storylines that we've seen emerge over the last, I don't want to say just this year, but over the last maybe 6 to 12 months, a lot of breweries laying people off, a lot of breweries retreating from markets, pulling back and focusing on local or regional models, foreclosures happening, breweries going out of business, a lot of dark skies, a lot of gloomy skies out there. How much of that do you guys pay attention to, and how much of the headlines do you read and start to worry about the future stability of the industry when we're hearing about breweries going out of business every week, getting sold at an auction, laying dozens of people off, hundreds of people off in some cases? How do you guys wake up every day and go to work and stay positive?
A feel-good question of the summer right there.
Like I said, we only had a couple questions
Nice
left,
finish.
so.
Who wants to go? I'll go first. Back to that jaws of death, scare moment I gave. There's going to be successful models that weather this moment. That are awesome thing is, unlike the late '90s, this moment has nothing to do with scale. There can be awesome, successful breweries that have just opened up or are 20 years old that are choosing to stay local or trying to go national or multi-state. But I would say it is a moment where if your interest is becoming a brand that's in a bunch of states where you're relying on your distribution partners to sell the majority of your beers instead of your own outlets, not only do you have to come correct with being world-class in quality, consistency, and well-differentiated, but you have to bring the resources that your distributors need to stay high on their totem pole of priorities, like traditional, marketing and sales plans that are easy to understand and easy to execute, and yet exciting to the consumer. And you need to invest in people. I think you said that in Feet on the Street, and you did as well. You need to make sure there's people that are representing your brand in every market. If you're not the most local brand in that market, there's someone sitting at this bar saying, why is there a Dogfish handle on here? And thankfully, Caitlin's saying, motherfucker, don't touch my handle, because she's here every day,
That's absolutely true. I got to follow up to that, Sam, and I can't agree more. For some of the folks that I've been able to speak to here in the crowd, you've heard me say it. One of the most important things is boots on the street. Get out there, tell your story, because I know my guests want to know it. They want to hear all about it. So just like the general session this morning, go hire someone, then tell the BA about it.
Duffy? Bring us back. Bring us back to the positive side of things.
Oh, jeez. Shit.
This isn't going how I scripted it.
Pass. Pass. Here's what I would say. I would echo all those comments. I recently interviewed a guy in Denver who works for a brewery, and he's not available in Summit County, Colorado, but he's sending his beer to Connecticut. And that's a recipe for disaster. And I pulled him aside after the interview was over, and I'm like, you're killing your brewery. You're killing your brewery. You're hurting the entire industry. Yeah, and blindly sending beer across the country without proper representation, the thing that we got is personality and authenticity, and if we don't shepherd that personally everywhere we are, then we can expect to get diluted. I mean, we just can. That said, I know that brands will deliver us. We are in a really, really crazy time right now, and this industry has been in an earlier crazy time. And back when, in the 90s, it was like, oh man, we're done. You know, $4.99, we're done. And then we really like Lazarus. We come back, and here we are, and we have awesome brands, awesome people. We have much more scale, but we have to make sure we're focusing on A, B, and C. Worry about A, B, and C. When you find yourself worrying about D, E, and F, or like, God forbid, L, M, N, O, forget about LMNO, which is fun to say, but get back to A, B, and C, because let's do what we do well for the next 3 to 5 years, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think that sort of jives with some of the comments you had shared last week about the pendulum swinging back towards more approachable, more sessionable, reliable brands that are just there always, and you're starting to see some of that in the market. How long until you think that becomes the sort of normal tendency of drinkers to seek out? You've talked a lot about brands today and just honing in and owning that. How long until you see drinkers start to return to that and that pendulum swing further back away from constant sampling and constant trial? And will that stabilize the market at that point?
I'm sure Dave could probably speak to it as regards data, but I think we're seeing it now. I mean, I think we're seeing folks that have climbed the hop mountain or climbed the ABV mountain. It's kind of like when I was young and I just had a bunch of weird cars. I had a Saab and I had a Ford Escort, which I put a ski rack on so I could look cool, which didn't work. And it had an 8-track player in it, but it turns out I'm not that cool. But I ended up going to the serviceable old Toyota, man, because it gets the job done.
Yeah.
I feel like the pendulum is shifting back to those brands that are the old favorites. That when I was drinking Brooklyn Lager years ago, and I forgot how good this is, and it's actually a really, really good beer. So I suspect that the data probably proves that out a little bit.
I can definitely talk to that. I mean, just looking at the IRI off-premise numbers for a brewery like Sierra Nevada, one of the brewers that brought craft to where it is today. They had a down year last year. Trends were in the red. Through year-to-date 18 numbers, back in the black. So they saw a lot of success with their seasonal, some of their new entries, one of their new variety pack entries. So some of the old guard is seeing that pendulum swing back towards them in their favor. So today's point, we are seeing it a little bit now, and we'll see if that trend continues.
But please don't lose the innovation, right?
No, of course
nimble,
not.
Stay nimble.
Maybe just keep the innovation in the tap room. I don't know. All right. Well, we've got time for maybe one more question, which usually means I sneak in like 2 or 3. But I'll try to keep it to one. Since we're talking about that pendulum swinging, and since we're talking about innovation, what is one trend that you guys are watching in terms of product development? It could be hazy IPAs or rosés or whatever you want. Marijuana, I don't know, we haven't touched on that yet, and how that's impacting the category. So what's one trend that you're watching, and what's maybe something cautionary you would provide the remaining folks who are still with us in the audience today, a watch out for the rest of the year? And we'll start with Dave and we'll go down the line.
So a lot of the questions I get on a daily basis have a lot to do with packaging and pricing, especially lately. I mean, we've seen a shift from bottles to cans. We've seen a shift from larger pack sizes like 12 packs in the red in favor of the smaller pack sizes, 6-packs, 4-packs, singles. And lately it seems like it's shifting back toward value packs, lower prices, 15 packs, things like that. So in terms of what I'm keeping my eye on, it's pricing and packaging for craft at retail. That's kind of my hot button issue lately. As far as something to watch out for moving forward, and you touched on it a bit with a lot of brewers that are finding themselves in some hot water now, it's, be wary of rapid expansion, chasing short-term volume gains, because the demand might be there for total craft, but it's cut into a lot of pieces now, and it's harder and harder to build your brand the further away you move from home. The relevance falls off, velocity on the shelf at retail falls off. Rapid expansion can leave you vulnerable in your own backyard. Missed opportunities, not penetrating your classes of trade as deep as you possibly can, out-of-stock scenarios, and that can get you in a lot of trouble down the road. So that would be my big watch out moving forward.
Great points. Charles?
Wow, that sums up a lot. That sums up a lot. So as far as outside of those great points, especially about the depth in, within the market, some things that I've seen out there that have surprised me a little bit have been the proliferation of 4-pack 16-ounce. So that, for me, somebody that draws a planogram all day long, they create nightmares for me. I know it's great for the convenience channel, and that's awesome. It creates a nightmare for me, so I'll just put that out there. Now, a 6-pack 12 ounce is great, so but 4-pack 16 ounce is a nightmare. Things that keep me up at night. I mentioned earlier the innovation thing, and that's I really want to hit home on that. The big guys came out with some big brands this year, so please don't lose that. Don't let the pendulum swing back too far.
Sam?
Yeah, I guess my trend that we're watching and my watch out concern are the same thing, which is don't let craft beer turn into a buck a bottle game. $15 15-pack is a trend we're watching, and it's a watch out for indie craft.
I think I would dovetail off that, and I would say that it would remind us all that we've been at a package for package price disadvantage for like the last 30 years. We really have. And then what's got us here to this wildly successful place is really, really good brands. It really has. Rah, rah. So let's keep doing that. Don't be afraid. Just keep on building brand value.
Awesome. Yeah, let's give it up for these guys. I think that's a great place to end and go have a beer. We can all discuss this off stage. Thank you guys for joining Brew Talks. If you like what we did here this evening, come see us in Santa Monica later this year at Brewbound Live for our 2-day conference. And let's have a beer. Cheers.
Good job, dude. Thank you.
Orchestrated has helped so much in our daily activities.
When we sit together now in a meeting, everybody has access to the same reports and the same way of looking at things.
There's just so many functionalities that are niche to the brewery and really make our lives easier.
The one thing for me that sets Obeer apart is them taking customer feedback and actually applying it to the software.
We manage things before Obeer by the seat of our pants. Lots of manual processes, tons of spreadsheets.
So really bringing everyone under one roof as far as software goes, I would say that Obeer absolutely pays for itself.
Obeer is tying everything together. Now we have everything in one place.
It's a fantastic platform. I love Obeer.
Brew Talks is a traveling meetup series for beer business professionals that are already attending industry gatherings like the Craft Brewers Conference, the National Beer Wholesalers Association Next Gen event, and the Great American Beer Festival. Brewbound, together with our friends at Dogfish Head Craft Brewery, will be hosting 3 Brew Talks meetups in 2018, as well as 3 more in 2019. But this year, our first one will be on May 1st in Nashville, Tennessee during the Craft Brewers Conference, and then we'll head to Austin, Texas in August, co-located alongside the NBWA Next Gen event, and September we'll be in Denver, Colorado during the Great American Beer Festival.
Dogfish has been a long-time supporter of Brew Talks, and now that we're actually collaborating on the series, it feels awesome because the old world beer communication was like monologuing, billboards, radio ads, TV ads. In the new world, it's about dialogue and communicating, and these events are awesome forums for that communication.
From growing really quickly comes at a serious cost, and when I was at Dogfish, I heard that a lot, but I've learned it personally. And when you're distracted on growth and new markets or anything but what's happening day in, day out with your brewery, with your beer, and with your people, then you're not focused on the right things, because it's those 3 things that matter the most in the long run.
The Brew Talk series is attended by brewers, distributors, retailers, investors, suppliers, and they're all showing up to hear honest discussions on the state of the beer industry and to network with one another.
So the industry is changing so quickly, and these events are so important because we're at this really